Morning.
Good morning.
Mitchell, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good morning. So we have a change, just one change and it's nothing to do with the agenda or anything, but
Morning, how you doing?
the committee secretary is now Jeanette Short. Jeanette Short, she's the secretary, Councilmember Mitchell. So, and she's taking over for Julie, and Julie's gonna, she's staying in Alpena, working with the assistant deputy and that. So Jeanette is taking over as the secretary.
Good morning.
So here's what we have on the line right now. We have just about everybody.
Mark, Chris.
We've been having to do a short oral session.
Well, I've been doing a short summary and any updates.
He's disconnected or what?
Test 1, 2.
We don't
We don't have anybody. Yeah, we don't have anybody.
I'm ready.
You're ready, but they're not.
Not quite a forward yet.
No one's here.
Well, actually,
We can go ahead and do our
Barbara, go ahead
reports.
because
There's no action items,
items,
so it's just a question of how long you want to wait and see any of the others.
If anyone else comes.
you want to give them like a couple minutes. And then,
They obviously are planning on coming.
Yeah.
So we should have Mike, Bill, Joe, Parker, and Janice. Janice is gonna come. though,
She's
right?
supposed to be here. She might be stuck on traffic.
Traffic is terrible out there, especially on 57 south and 60.
Oh, I saw there was
Quite
a
a mess. There was single alert on 57 south.
motorcyclist.
how do you get here?
Up to 57. So I saw
Are you
the,
going north?
yeah, it was,
Yeah, like me, I'm going north.
You don't come over the 241 to the 71. No.
there'd be an extra toll. Actually,
On the
there'd be 3 extra
district. On
tolls.
the district.
Yeah.
So where do you live though?
South Orange County? Yeah, at least a year.
Yeah, so you
Good to
come
go.
to that toll.
The 241, but I just take the 5 to 57 and then straight. Well, actually, I take Laguna Canyon to 5 to 57. But I saw as I was driving in early, I saw the motorcycle down and the car
Oh,
stopped.
no.
And then it was,
Was he splattered or what?
no, he looked, actually he was walking, so I thought, well, that's good.
So it's single alert, is that down there or something?
I don't, well, I thought he was the biker and
Yeah.
Did he have the helmet on?
Okay, good.
But everything was stopped right after him going south, and I just thought, oh, glad I'm not going that way.
Yeah, I didn't think he was coming.
Guillermo?
Yes.
He's got a double dose last
Yeah, I guess.
She called, so he told Lori he's coming.
I saw that. I never heard of that one.
I saw a whole documentary on it. It was very experimental, but very successful in certain places. But experimental in the sense that they don't know how much virus to administer. They want enough to cause inflammation, and then the body begins to fight cancer. But if you administer too much of the virus, it can have very adverse reaction. So they were at the experimental phase. They're determining how much virus they can administer. So
That's the
that's the
polio virus.
experimental part of it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's always very, actually very promising. They
very
went
promising.
to the clinical trials, right? Just went, is it the one where they went directly just to human trials?
they're doing trials because I think, the question was how much do you administer? And that may not be an easy answer because it may be individually dependent.
Morning.
So, morning, Janice.
The memo.
Good.
I got blue on too, so.
Just trying to fit in.
You got
Well, I was all set to
You
go,
got-
it was just me at the
you got
party,
it.
so I better wait until somebody else comes. So, we can go ahead because, we don't have any action items, so. Good morning, everyone. I'm gonna call to order the legislative committee meeting. And, have a fairly short agenda today, but we're gonna hear about what happened, in the last, weeks of, and what's happening in the beginning weeks and now as they're coming back to Washington. So, with me, I have Janice Rutherford, and no one's on the EBT yet, so we will just proceed with our informational items. And the first of those is Carmen Group. And Gary Weitzman will report for us on that. Gary, you're on the phone, I understand.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Glad to be with you again today. I'm just going to give a brief overview of what's happening in Congress, and I have a couple of quick updates from the U.S. Department of Transportation.
Great, thank you.
Congress is back in session after a 7-week recess, as you know, and the Congress will be in, just so you have the schedule, the Congress will be in through the end of September. The Senate may extend to the first week of October, but then they'll be out for the election campaigning. And the plan right now is they'll return on the week of November 14th, the week after the election, for 1 week. Then they'll recess for the Thanksgiving week after that, and then the following week they'll come in again for the remainder of a lame duck session for about 3 weeks until December 16th. So that's the overview of the congressional schedule as we see it right now. Just a quick note on a couple of the issues, the major issues we see here in the September portion of this congressional session. You've got the matter of the appropriations funding of the government, and I'll defer to Mark and some others to get into the details of that, but that'll be the critical issue. How are you going to fund the government past September 30th? And then you've got issues about funding for the Zika virus, which will require new funding, the Louisiana flooding, there's issues there, and then the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, is looking for new money there as well. So those are some of the big issues we see here in September. And then you look towards the lame duck session, and you again have the appropriations matter. You've got a bunch of tax extenders that are expiring at the end of the year, some of the ones that we're concerned about that others will talk about a little bit here. You've got the National Defense Authorization Bill, possibility of debates about the Supreme Court nominee, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement. Those are just some of the big issues that we see in Congress going forward for the remainder of the year right now. Turning to some just quick notes from the U.S. Department of Transportation, where we follow some of the issues that we've been concerned about. We're watching the implementation of the provision of the FAST Act, the new transportation bill that has to do with the designation of national corridors for electric vehicles and alternative fueled vehicles. And over the summer, the department put out a solicitation asking for recommendations for which corridors should be designated. And those solicitations were due on August 22nd, and now they're being reviewed by the department, and we're told that the final designations are going to be made before November. They said sometime in late September or in October is when we'll see some definitive answers on that. Then I also wanted to just mention quickly a couple of major DOT grant programs, some news here from just the other day here this week. DOT announced what they call the Fast Lane grants. These are new grants that come out of the new transportation bill that was passed last year. These are grants for major highway and freight projects of national and regional significance, and they awarded 18 projects grants in 15 states. There was one grant for California and San Diego County for $49 million. And then also earlier in July, the major Tiger grant announcement came out, and again, there were 40 projects there in 32 states, and there were 4 projects in California, Los Angeles County, San Francisco, San Bernardino, and Live Oak received grants through the Tiger program this year. So that's a quick update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Gary. I want to welcome Dr. Parker and Dr. Burke this morning. Thank you for attending our meeting. We started with Gary Weitzma from the Carmen Group, and I will now ask if there's any questions from our committee members on the report. Seeing none, thank you very much, Gary, for your report, and we'll move on now to Cassidy and Associates. And I believe Amelia Jenkins is going to report from Cassidy. Amelia, are you on the phone?
Hi, yes, actually this is Caleb Fralick
Okay.
from Cassidy, and we have the full Cassidy team here on the phone for questions, for follow-up. Just going to provide 2 quick updates in addition to our written report. The first is that the Energy Conference for the comprehensive energy legislation that's moving through Congress had their first official meeting. So the House and Senate conferees got together for their first meeting to start working through the bill to work towards final passage of that effort. They don't have a subsequent meeting yet scheduled. The word that we've received is that they're going to try and do one more meeting before they break for the October recess to try and work out some of the outstanding controversial issues. Of note in this for South Coast is that the Vehicle Innovation Act is in the Senate version of the bill, but not in the House version of the bill. So South Coast has written a letter to Chairwoman Murkowski expressing their support, and we continue to convey that support to the conferees in hopes that that provision remains in the final passage, the final bill. The next item to report on is that the Cassidy team is working with the South Coast staff to work to prepare a staff delegation trip to the South Coast offices. It would be a visit to the region to highlight the work that South Coast has done, and also tour the facilities to show off the laboratory and kind of put a personal face on some of the work that South Coast is doing, especially for folks that might not have visited the facility or the region before. So this is part of the brand building effort we're working on in Capitol Hill, and again, we're working with the South Coast legislative staff on putting that together for the fall. That concludes our remarks, and we're available for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Caleb. Any questions? Do we have an approximate date of this delegation trip to South Coast?
End of October.
We are working for an October timeframe, but we have not yet solidified dates.
Okay. All right, end of October. Okay, good. All right, we will keep our board members informed of that, as I think we would want them to join in meeting the delegation when it comes. And we'll move to Kadish and Associates. We have Mark Kadish and Chris Keurig, I believe, on the phone. I'm not sure which one is going to report, or if both will report. Can you give us a short report and an update, please?
Yes, this is Mark. Actually, Chris Keurig will give a brief report on the status of appropriations.
Okay.
Hi, this is Chris. Hi there, Madam Chair. This is Chris Keurig talking. Yeah, I've been asked to talk a little bit about the appropriation status. As Gary alluded to earlier in his report, there's a lot of pressure and discussion back here about avoiding a government shutdown. All the appropriations bills technically have to be passed by the end of this month. That's not going to happen. So there will be some kind of continuing resolution. The Senate seems to have centered around a CR until December 9th, with a fallback being December 16th, to be completed with all the FY17 bills by then. They'll try to pass that bill sometime in the third week of September. The House situation on the CR is less clear. There's a pretty hardcore caucus of Republican members that want to kick the funding decisions into next year with a 6-month CR. There's also, a significant number that don't want to do that either. So I think that they will eventually get to the December 9th date also, but just not without jumping through some procedural hurdles first. That said, I've talked to a couple of staff members, appropriations staff people this week, and they are both the House and the Senate, and they are all working towards completing their bills at the same time completing work on a CR, of indeterminate length. But they are working towards them. The things that we've been following along with Gary on the House side, the DERA funding, the airshed grants funding, and the funding for the zero emissions programs are still very much in play. But I can't tell you exactly when we'll have clarity on those bills actually passing. Every bill has got some challenges to it, some related to money, some not related to money. The bills that we care about usually tend to do more with policy issues than funding issues, which is not to say that every subcommittee wouldn't turn down more money, but it's not coming. So that's kind of where we are now. It's not a tremendous amount of clarity other than CR will happen. The House will probably be more difficult to get there than the Senate, but that will happen by the end of the month. No one wants to have an election year preceded by a government shutdown. So there's tremendous incentive on all sides to come to a deal on some sort of CR. And that's really all the appropriations update that I have.
Okay, great, thank you. Mark, are you going to add anything?
No, I think that's great.
That's it. Okay, thank you very much. The other thing, I'm going to just ask our staff to give us a little bit of an update on the low NOx petition and what's been happening with that. I don't know who can do that, whether.
I can address that.
Okay.
So, as we know, EPA finalized phase 2 greenhouse gas rule shortly over a month or so ago. And that's consistent with what EPA had relayed to us, is that they wanted to finish that finalization. I think it took them a little longer than they had hoped. We were hoping they would be done by the end of July. So what they have said to us is that their intention is to complete that as they've done, and then review, and then they would hopefully begin starting within, I would say, 30 to 45 days on our rule. Now, obviously, that would just be an initiation. We received a petition, we're going to begin moving forward. And in part, that would allow the agency to say this is something that's going forward, and part of our rationale was to get it started before the end of the fiscal year. But more importantly, to get it started before that 60-day time frame of when the administration would change. And so we're still on track for that. Chris Grenler, who heads up the Office of Transportation and Air Quality, is on vacation. I actually touched base with Richard Corey a couple of days ago on this matter, and we're both, I would say, fairly positive that we anticipate that they'll begin as we understand it.
Good, okay.
So we're on track.
That's very good news.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Dr. Parker. Go ahead.
And this may be for Mr. Nastro also. As we know that the governor signed AB 32 yesterday saying that now we've got to go 40% less than 1990 for carbon footprint. We just came out with SCAQMD, so since we're talking about legislation, is this going to basically have a material effect on the way that we're going to approach doing this in light of the fact that the cap and trade monies themselves are still tied up in the legislature and, in the governor's debate as to exactly what's going to happen. What effect is that going to have on our overall outlook and the way that we are presenting SCAQMD right now as it relates to achievement of the carbon footprint requirements?
This is Phil Crabb. Basically, one thing as to the greenhouse gas funds, there was, of course, a deal cut just in the wee hours of the last couple of days of the legislative session. So that about 900 million of the funds were allocated, and about 368 million of those funds went to the Air Resources Board. There was a $462 million amount left over for future allocation in future years. So with SB 32 being signed into law, that it basically extends that deadline through 2030. You're right, the cap and trade program is only authorized through 2020. So there still is questions as to whether that system will continue and whether future funds are going to continue to be generated, because of course there were only about 10 million and 8 million respectively generated in the last two auctions, in the cap and trade auctions. So there is a lot of still uncertainty, but the governor has talked about possibly going to the ballot box in 2018 in terms of going to the people to extend the cap and trade program. So there's a lot still to be negotiated in terms of that. So we'll have to look. We'll continue to be working with the folks in Sacramento to see where things are going.
And then Dr. Parker, I would add to that, from a strategic perspective, it really doesn't alter the development of our plan to go after state funding. And in that particular aspect, we're still looking at what are all the pots of funds that are available, and then what additional pots could be perhaps generated either through bond measures or through legislative action. So from a planning perspective, we're still looking at all in a sense. And it doesn't affect us in terms of what we're going to put in or put out.
Have we exhausted exploring the possibility of adding a fee to registrations as some of the other air control districts have done? And Dr. Burke has talked about some of them have much higher fees than we are getting for our region in order to help us through this with these new mandates that are coming about now.
Sure, Dr. Parker, as you and other board members have made very clear to us, we need to explore all of those options. And we'll be reporting shortly on the development of our plan to pursue some of those options. The DMV option is a very viable option. We think that depending on the amount that we're seeking, if we were to be commensurate with what San Joaquin has done, we could raise upwards of $300 million. So we're putting all of this together in a plan that, again, looks at what those potential sources of funding could be, what additional authorization may be necessary, and all of this in order to achieve the goals that are specified within the SCAQMD.
Thank you very much.
I'm confused. Where do you get the $300 million figure?
So if we were looking at a $30 increase in registration fees, looking at the total number of vehicles, it's roughly 300 million.
Well, San Joaquin's at $50.
Do you want to address this part?
Dr. Burke,
See, I thought we go to, see, to be honest, I'm talking to everybody about $60. Because $60 raises us close to $800 million.
Yes, it does. And we can
And
certainly
then,
move
you
in that
know,
direction.
and at that point, you're about finished. So, because if you're staking your whole plan on this plan, you need to be able to talk to people about something concrete that they can see and feel. They might not like it. Now, I've met with BizFed and I've met with environmental groups and I've discussed this thing, and the reaction is very interesting. Nobody wants to pay $60, but everybody says, that would cure the problem. So I'm not, $35 doesn't mean, you know, that's like, that doesn't appeal to me.
Did I
You
fail
gotta
to say
talk about
that's
a
the
number.
minimum?
What are you gonna do, what are you gonna do with $300 million and you need $1 billion?
Well, it's 300 million more than we had before, but it's a minimum, and we can sort of
Yeah.
look at it from the range perspective, like you said. And I think that would actually give us a better opportunity to get that broader input. So we could say from 300 to 800 million, depending on the board's direction and going forward. But that would also, again, just be one additional pot. And if we can look at some of those other pots, we might be able to spread some of that around, so to speak. And that was sort of the strategy.
Well, in my discussion with all these groups, their perspective is there's not pots available that can get you to the number that we need other than this pot. What's your response to that?
It's early in the process, and we haven't had a chance to talk to them and show them all the elements of the plan. We do think that there's other opportunities, but to the extent that we can maximize the return from this strategy, we would definitely do so.
Let me tell you their response to it's early in the process.
Okay.
How can you put a plan forward if you haven't been through the process?
Are they saying how can you put an AQMP plan forward without going through the money? Well, that's done all the time.
Identifying.
In terms of developing plans that aren't funded, we can do it.
We have to, we're on this path now, we have to do it.
We are doing it.
We've been shot out of the gun now, so you can't take the bullet back.
No.
You know, it's gone. It's left the gun. So we have to do this. What I'm trying to do is make sure that we can get there is in some manner, fashion, or form.
Right.
I want to be helpful. I don't want to be a hindrance.
No, you're not at all.
May I ask a question? What is the procedure for us being able to do this now? Obviously, you and Dr. Burke is where I know Mrs. Rutherford and I may be the newer members here, and I can't speak for her. She may know obviously more about it than I do. What is the procedure that we need to implement in order to raise the fees?
You need legislation. You need a bill that says you can go to 50 or 60.
That's what I thought. So,
yes.
Yeah, this is Barbara Good. I just wanted to point out that there's actually two ways to raise the vehicle registration fee. One way would be for the legislature to authorize the district board to do that. The other way would be for the legislature to do that directly, which, because of Proposition 26 that limits the ability of local governments to raise fees without them being called a tax, it may be preferable to have the legislature do it directly, but there are two ways to do it.
Can you explain that to me again, Barbara? I understood the
Proposition 26 was adopted by the voters back in 2010, and it redefines basically almost all fees and charges that are imposed by local governments as taxes. And so it also says that if a local government imposes a tax, what we used to call a fee would now be called a tax under this language, then that has to be adopted by a vote of the people, and it has to be a 2/3 vote. So we haven't been authorized by the legislature to impose a tax, but the legislature could adopt what is called under Prop 26 a tax by a 2/3 vote of the legislature. So that's actually a more safe way of doing it to avoid the argument that this is actually a tax under Proposition 26.
so we would have to have 2/3 vote of the legislature in order to be able to raise the fees
Well, that would be the safest way.
under that.
Yes.
What did she say? Yeah, yes, okay. Got it. All right, thank you very much. I didn't mean to, excuse me, Madam Chairman, for veering off, but I thought that since we were talking about legislation and talking about dollars and appropriations, it may be an opportune time to raise this issue, especially in light of these new bills that were just signed yesterday by Governor Brown.
Yes, thank you. No, that's very pertinent discussion that we should be having as well. So we still have not heard from our state representative consultants, so we'll go next to Paul Gonzalez from Gonzalez and Sons. Paul, could you please report?
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I just want to give a quick update to my report. As you all know, we adjourned, the legislature adjourned their 2015-16 legislative session on August 31st. At midnight, there was 815 bills sent to the governor for his consideration, and he has until September 31st to act on those bills. As Dr. Parker had mentioned, the governor signed yesterday SB 32 and AB 197. Those two bills were double joined together, meaning one couldn't pass without the other. It's another step in the legislative goal to reach 80% reduction by 2050. And again, not to belabor the point a little bit, but as we mentioned, there's the lawsuit out there by the California Chamber that's still pending on cap and trade and the stability of it and whether or not it was successfully adopted by the legislature. The governor and the legislative leaders did not take action on that this year. They decided to move forward with setting the targets and the dates, and wanted to just wait and see how the lawsuit plays out. Should the lawsuit not go favorably for the state, then they will come back and try and do a verification of the cap and trade through legislation. If they can't reach the 2/3 vote requirement because, again, of Prop 26, then they will take it to the ballot. So as Philip had mentioned, the cap and trade auctions have been rather dismal these past few times. I believe the June auction brought in about $10 million. July auction was canceled, and the last auction brought in about $8 million compared to the starting out of about $500 million for the original auction. So they're hopeful that SB 32 and AB 197 will bring some stability to the market. But again, we are just pending, waiting to see what will happen with the lawsuit to find some type of legislative direction moving forward if need be. With that, that's the end of my report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Paul. I want to recognize Supervisor Antonovich has joined us. Good morning, Supervisor. Thank you for being with us today. And are there any questions of Paul on, we already discussed what he reported on, but there may be some more discussion on that. So any other questions about that? Okay. Then we also have the report from Gonzalez, Quintana, Hunter, and Cruz, and Will Gonzalez and Matt Klopfenstein are on the phone. So good morning to both of you. Who will be reporting? We're anxiously awaiting a short report and update.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. This is Will Gonzalez. I'll be quick, and then I'll punt to Matt to get a little quick detail on finally, the cap and trade money that was released this year, as was earlier mentioned. After a 2-year delay on cap and trade funding, we got a deal right at the very end of session. $900 million was allocated out of a total of $1.4 million that was available. This, just a reminder, is 40% of the total cap and trade funding. The other 60% is pre-programmed for the governor's high-speed rail and affordable housing program. So this is only a small portion, but significant. Of the $900 million, several programs were funded that will impact AQMD, and I'll let Matt run through those very quickly. But I just wanted to mention that, the funding finally happening is important statewide for emission reductions, but just as important, we also were successful in getting AB 1550 by Assemblyman Gomez passed. This strengthened previous requirements on the funding, the GGRF funding that was allocated to disadvantaged communities and the South Coast region. is the net winner, quite frankly, with this bill and getting more money allocated to the district. The existing law required 25% of GGRF money to benefit disadvantaged communities, and 10% of the money be located actually spent inside disadvantaged communities. Under AB 1550, which is now sitting on the governor's desk, and we expect to be signed, 25% of the money actually has to be spent within disadvantaged communities, and 5% within a half mile, in other words, benefiting those disadvantaged communities. So if you look at the Cal Enviro screen and the maps, that bodes really well for the South Coast Air District. I think this information, the passage of that bill, if it were to be signed, will then strengthen our hand at CARB as we argue for more money, GGRF money to be allocated to the South Coast District. It's worthy of note that AB 1550, while supported by South Coast SCAQMD, was opposed by the Bay Area Air District because they felt they would be a net loser in that program. So hopefully that's a significant leg up for us in the CARB discussions over where these dollars are allocated. And with that, I'd pass it over really quick to Matt to just walk through the three main programs that are going to be of interest to South Coast.
Good morning, Chairman. This is Matt Kloppenstein. I just wanted to give a little bit of detail around the $368 million that was allocated to CARB from the GGR Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund for low carbon transportation. So $133 million is going to go to the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project. And there's an important trailer bill that went along with this that changes the income caps. So it actually lowers them so that folks who earn over $150,000 will no longer be eligible for the rebate through CVRP. And then the trailer bill also adds $500 to the incentive for low-income participants. So those were both priorities for a lot of members of the legislature who represent disadvantaged communities, and was reflected in the trailer bill. The other important spending out of this $368 million is $80 million that is going to the Enhanced Fleet Modernization Program, the EFMP, as well as Plus Up pilot, and the potential for ARB to spend up to $20 million of that for other light-duty pilot projects. So those are the two spending areas within the low-carbon transportation that are going to be most important, I think, to South Coast. So I just wanted to highlight those.
Great, thank you very much. Is the question for me, is the EFMP program and the Plus Up program now extended to all of the state of California? Before it was a pilot just in San Joaquin and in our district? What is the status on that?
Unlike the language that was added to clarify CVRP, they did not give any direction to CARB about the Enhanced Fleet Modernization Program, so it will be up to CARB. The legislature did not weigh in.
Okay. Thank you. Is that Dr. Burke? Sorry. A little percussion.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Parker.
I recognize that most of the statute themselves that have been signed designate most of this money is going to go directly to CARB. Is there any discretion itself of the money being given directly to the local air resource districts? Or does it actually have to flow to CARB and then to us on a discretionary basis? Or is it on an allocated basis based on population or whatever?
So,
does anyone know?
This is
Dr. Parker, the next step is these are broad allocations to the agencies to distribute under existing programs. What is incumbent on us is to engage very closely with ARB, CEC, and the other implementing agencies to make sure that all the parties that are set out in the various pieces of legislation regarding the GGRF funds are fully implemented so that our area gets its fair share. There's a series of parties set up in the legislation for disadvantaged communities, for zero-emission vehicles, for infrastructure, for economic development. to make that a reality that makes sense for us, we now have to engage and help the implementing agencies implement the state legislation or state law.
Obviously, the reason why I asked that, and Ms. Mitchell, since you're on the board of CARB,
Yes.
we have almost 18 million residents in our region. And it certainly would dwarf many of the other agencies in relationship to the number of cars, et cetera. To make sure that the allocation itself is based on those demographics and not some other obscure demographics that would tend to be equally prorated, that really will not be reflective of the true issues that we have here versus what some of the other districts themselves would in fact have. So I just wanted to see if that was something that we should really be very well aware of and stress.
Ask her if the new board members.
But Dr. Burke has given me a directive here.
Ask her if the new board members are making a difference in the direction of this money.
Okay. Did you hear his question?
Well, we haven't seen that yet because the new board members really haven't been on long enough to have been putting a voice in on the appropriations of the money. So I haven't seen that. The new board members are the environmental justice members who represent EJ communities. What I certainly will do is advocate for our district. I've always done that, and I'll continue to do that. What William explained was that the cap and trade money actually goes through like 13 different agencies. So we get 381 million of that. I mean, the CARB gets 381 million of that for the programs that CARB administers. But other agencies get some money too. As you know, the Energy Commission gets quite a chunk, and the Strategic Growth Council gets quite a chunk, and that money is decided. That money primarily goes to the affordable housing, sustainable community strategies through grant applications from the various districts. So there's different pots that go through different agencies. What we're talking about here is this pot, the 381 million that comes to CARB, that's for, primarily it's going to be for air quality programs. And those are the ones that we are really concerned about, that we want to work for to get the money. And I urge our staff to continue working with CARB staff, and I will certainly advocate for our district as well.
And it's important to note that
And the faster we get it out is the better we're going to be. In essence, that bill is signed now, and I assume that it will be effective, January 1st, or effective date itself of the distribution? Usually bills that are signed about this time. All you folks there who are legislative experts.
Right, unless it's an urgency bill or budget bills, basically the standard is that bills signed by the governor will take effect January 1st of the following year. So yeah, January 1st, 2017 is when most of these bills will take effect. But of course, this is that important second part. As William stated earlier, we get the general allocations and guidance from the legislature. We move on to negotiate with the state agencies and work with the staff to make sure we get our fair share in the district. Another pot of money that actually wasn't mentioned earlier that's important to note is $150 million for heavy-duty vehicles and off-road equipment investments. So that'll be definitely very helpful for the district, and we'll be working with CARB staff and other agencies to try to focus on obtaining as much money as possible. So.
And to the same extent, I don't think there's any other district that have the number of heavy-duty vehicles going out of the ports that we do, up and down the 710 and the 605 freeways that are really very closely related to these indigenous communities. So those kind of staff is certainly more capable of stressing that. But I've seen some of these situations where we pass these bills, and 2 or 3 years later, the money's still sitting there when everybody is squabbling over what we're going to get and how we're going to get it, et cetera, and we end up with pretty much the same amount of money that we did, if we had done something beforehand. Hopefully this time that we'll be able to move on that and help us to start making some of these strategic positions very quickly without having to have all these delays.
And Chairman, the reason I resigned from CARB was that I found that the staff would make the determinations and bring them to the CARB board for rubber stamp approval, and I didn't consider myself a rubber stamp guy. So after a couple of years of that, after fighting it as hard as I could, I gave up. I'm not as good as you. You're 10 times better than me at that, no question.
Well, I don't know about that.
As
but-
it relates to the distribution of this money, that's the only thing that gives me some hesitancy, is that the board will not actually make the distribution of the funds that were made at the staff level and presented to the board as a fait accompli.
And speaking to that, it would be very useful for me then for our staff to do some comparisons that Dr. Parker has suggested, like how many vehicles do we have versus other districts, how many heavy-duty trucks do we have, those kinds of comparisons. So a strong argument can be made at CARB why we should get more of these monies. You know that the EFMP plus up monies, they came only to our district and to San Joaquin in the original program. And we have a backlog of applications for that program as well as for CVRP. So CVRP is statewide, but EFMP plus up has been only down here. So we certainly will be able to get those monies out the door pretty quickly because we have people on the waiting list waiting for the money. So we will work on that, and if staff can give me some help on making the arguments at CARB for why we deserve what we asked for. Thank you. Any other questions?
Very good.
We'll turn that around for you to have a sort of a fact sheet given all the parties set out in the various pieces of GGRF-related legislation.
Right. Well, and of course, you know, we're a non-attainment area. We're not the only one, but we are probably, this district and San Joaquin are the most, prominent non-attainment in the state. I mean, there are other smaller county areas that are also non-attainment, but I think that's a very strong argument for us as well.
And we represent 94% of the disadvantaged communities identified by
Callan Bioscreen. Yeah. So
I think that's going to be the largest area as really, and I say that not as only being a minority person, but I say that in reference to what the governor's whole objective itself has been across the board. And that is to make sure that those communities do not feel that they are really undeserved and nobody cares and everything else. And I think with a lot of we can make that argument. Because that's when we start talking about out of the, 58 counties that we have in the state, is that in 4 counties, we represent 94% of all the disadvantage in this entire state. That's a significant.
Dr. Parker, just to clarify, that's actually a combination of San Joaquin Air Pollution Control District and South Coast. South Coast alone represents 66% plus of all the disadvantaged.
66.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
That's still a super majority. 66 and thirds, so I understand that controls everything that goes on, in reference to how things themselves should be distributed. So those people should have a very, very large representation and voice itself to be heard as it relates to where the pollution itself is most effective to the air quality or the lack of good air quality. So I know staff does this, and I know you guys do an excellent job, but I think that as a board member, I want to make sure that we minimize that we really beat that home every time we have an opportunity to do it, because we're the ones who have to sit through the meetings and listen to hundreds of people, as you all know, come before us and tell us how bad the air quality is in their communities. And I think we should really let them know. that we're doing something about it and fighting for them at every level in order to get our equal share, of dollars so that we can help to mediate, remedy some of the problems that we have.
See, I disagree with Dr. Parker. I think the governor used to care. I don't think he cares anymore. I absolutely don't. I think that if the 66% that is in our district is to be a relevant figure to anybody, it's going to be a relevant figure to the legislature only. Because I've never seen such an obsession with a choo-choo train. People are dying out here every day, and he's holding up the money for this imaginary train that somebody thinks they may be able to build, but are not quite sure, but it's his legacy. So, I don't think that to Carb, because Carb is the governor. Mary Nichols can't make a move 2 degrees in any direction without permission of the governor's office. So unless he cares, she doesn't care. And if he doesn't care, the only person who can correct it is the state legislature. And I got a little inkling in this last session that the legislature does care. So I think we're not like a lost ball in high weeds. I think we have a real chance. But I don't think it's for the governor's office. Just my personal opinion.
Thank you very much for that opinion. And of course, the $381 million is ours. I mean, is for air quality. It's not touched by the train. So the train money is in a separate pot. So let's see what we can get out of this pot.
Should be the same.
But the train money is indicative of an attitude. I'm going to hold up all this money until I get my train thing done. There are people who could use the money that is supposed to be in that fund to be curing people of circumstances which are detrimental to their health. That's all I'm saying.
Understood. Okay, let's see. We finished our state reports.
I just want to get them, Paul, are you still on the line?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Hey, Paul, this is Derek, can you give us just a summary of SB 1387, what happened there?
Sure. SB 1387, it was brought up on the last day of session on the Assembly floor. They brought it up early in the morning. The roll call was short, about 11 votes. I believe it was 30 yes votes to 33 no votes. It was one of the very last bills to be lifted off of call, and the bill ended up failing and did not pass.
Okay. And it's dead. It's not gone to a 2-year bill or anything like that, right? It's gone.
This is the end of the legislative session. So those bills
It's the end of a 2-year session, so there are no 2-year bills.
2-year session.
But as we like to say, the bill may die, but the authors typically don't. So.
All right. So we may see this rise again sometime in the future. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for our representative?
Somehow carry that message back.
What did you say?
Someone should carry that message back.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have the Home Rule Advisory Group's written report. And that's a written report, so we will just receive and file that. We have an opportunity here to ask for any other business from our members. Is there any other business that anyone wants to bring forward? Seeing none. Public comment period. We have some people here in our audience. Anyone want to make any comments? Seeing none. I don't see anyone in your respective locations. Is there anyone there that would want to comment? No. Okay. Our next meeting will be October 14th And we will see you all back here on that date. And this is adjourned, so October 14th. Thank you all.
Bye.
I think we'll stay for that.
Oh, look.